Now we're going to plant an apple tree. This came in the post and it's Discovery, fantastic apple. And they come all wrapped in bubble wrap, and this is type they're wrapped up. This is the root ball. This is called a bare rooted plant, and they've been grown, grafted and prepared at the nursery. All we have to do is put it into the ground. Now you can put these into the ground any time after September. It's basically bare rooted tree time, and you can buy these from September, October, November right the way through to February. As long as there are no leaves on the tree, it's perfectly happy. You could keep that like that for a couple of weeks if you need to prepare a spot or to shake something out or to change something round. They're dormant, so they're quite happy to stay as they are. However, to get it into the ground needs a little bit of preparation, and I'd like to show you what I've done just down here. Now I've dug a hole, and it looks like quite a big hole. I've dug it 2 spades deep, and I've got as far down, and if I brought some out here, I've got as far down as some clay. Now often you hear gardeners complaining about clay. I've got too much clay in my garden, but there's one thing that this guarantees, and that's moisture, because clay is always heavy with moisture. So a nice amount of clay in the soil is no bad thing really. At least it's not going to dry out, and that's fantastic. So I've got a hole, and it's 2 spades deep, and I'm going to add a combination of compost. I mixed this earlier, a combination of compost and fertiliser, and that's going to go in the bottom of the hole to around about 8 inches to a foot deep. Now this is going to give the plant a good start. If there's something bad about clay, it is that it's cold, but it doesn't matter because it's going to stay cold now until the spring. So this would be fantastic. The compost and the fertiliser will give the plant plenty of nutrients for when it bursts into leaf. So we've half filled the hole full of the compost fertiliser mixed. It's just a general fertiliser, 50-50. And out comes our bare rooted tree. Now, it doesn't look very happy, does it? It's kind of all stunted, not much going on there, but believe me, there's a good roots and it will burst into life. But obviously if you stick a stick in the ground, the weather's going to knock it over, or children or dogs or whatever, so they need some support. I always put my stake in before I start, and I put it at approximately a 45-degree angle. I don't like putting the plant in the ground and then ramming a stake in, because you could damage the roots by hitting the stake in. So this is going to be nestled nicely into the compost, but can you see here, this is an important thing. This part of the plant doesn't actually belong to this part of the plant. This is a rootstock. This is called a scion. This has been grafted onto that, and you can see where it's been grafted just here. And that's just got to more or less pop out of the soil. So we're going to bury the plant till that bit comes out of the soil. So you have to make sure that that lines up with where you want to put your stake. So it's going to be quite nice. It doesn't matter if it's a centimetre or so too proud or not, but that's fine. So that's where it's going to go, and to help me do it, I'm going to put the tie on first, because then it's not going to be falling over all of the time. Now, these ties are big fat rubber ties. Always try to buy these if you can, simply because the thin ones, even if you put it with a figure of 8, actually rub on the tree. This one's not going to rub, so I don't need to put it on a figure of 8. So that's going in there, and I'm simply going to tie the tie in place. Now, I'm not going to strangle the thing. I want plenty of room for the plant to grow, but I just don't want it to be blown over by the wind. So it's fairly secure. That's more than enough. Okay, there's plenty of give for when the wind does go, because if there's no give at all, as this plant gets thicker, it's going to eat into it. Eventually you'll cut this out and take this away, but for a year or two that's how it's going to stay. Now a little bit more compost around the root ball here. And now I'm going to put some soil in. This is a virgin spot really, it's not been used for much, and so this soil is not particularly rich in nutrients. That's why we've got a good load of compost in the bottom, and we're simply going to place our soil all the way around to fill in the hole. Take out some of these weed roots as we go along. Now in the spring, when this is beginning to burst into leaf, I'm going to top dress it with a whole load of compost and a whole load of fertiliser to give it an extra boost. Now probably the most important part of this takes place with your boot, because all of that root has to be really firmly in touch with the soil. So you press it in very firmly all the way around. Now can you see where the tree is joined to its root? Just proud of the top. Now what I'm going to do, and an old gardener taught me this, just finish it off with a top dressing of compost. Two things will happen here. The rain will trickle the nutrients into the roots, and also it looks finished off. So, one discovery apple planted very neatly in its own hole. In 3 years' time, we'll get fruit from it. Don't try and bother with any fruit for 3 years, but after 3 years, it will continue to blossom and it'll be fantastic.